Hey there, welcome back for another deep dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're jumping straight into a pretty significant political event up in Scotland, a specific by-election that just wrapped up.
That's right, the one triggered by that resignation.
Exactly. Maybe some internal party stuff behind that, the sources hint?
Seems possible, yes.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is that the turnout
Oh, yeah. What
was
did the sources say about that?
just under 54%, which, for a by-election is quite high.
Yeah, that definitely tells you people were paying attention. It felt important.
It really underscores the significance, I think. High engagement, high stakes, according to the analysis we looked at.
Right. So our mission today, as always, is to really dig into the source material you shared, the reports, the commentary. We want to understand what actually happened in this particular contest, why it matters, beyond just the winner.
And what it might signal, potentially, for Scottish politics, maybe even UK politics down the line.
Okay, let's unpack it then. The big headline, obviously Labour took the seat from the SNP.
A huge result, a real breakthrough moment for them there.
So how did they manage it? What did the sources suggest was key to that win?
Well, what's fascinating is how the analysis describes Labor's approach. Very, very focused, intensely local.
Local how? Like specific issues?
Exactly. They apparently zeroed in on things directly hitting people in that area: cost of living, NHS waiting times, housing, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this hyper-local focus, plus, it seems effectively jumping on some of the SNP's recent difficulties.
Like what
Yeah.
difficulties are mentioned?
The sources mentioned talk about leadership questions, some ongoing criticism about delivering public services. That combination seems to have been Labor's driver.
Okay, that makes sense. So if Labor was hitting those local points, what about the SMP? Why did they fall short here, according to the analysis? Losing this must be a blow.
Yeah, definitely a setback. Looking at the bigger picture the sources paint, it seems like maybe a mix of things. Perhaps some national fatigue with the SNP after, a long time in government. And then that local disappointment on those day-to-day service issues we just mentioned.
So a sense that promises weren't met, both big and small.
Kind of. According to some reports, voters felt maybe the focus wasn't quite there on independence, yes, but also, crucially, on improving those public services. And maybe their candidate just didn't have that same deep local recognition Labor managed to build.
Right. Now, we've seen a lot of commentary saying this isn't just one seat. It could signal something bigger, a mood shift maybe.
Well, it's always risky to read too much into one by-election, isn't it?
Sure.
But the sources do seem to treat this as potentially quite significant. Labor making gains in places they haven't won for, well, a decade or more. And that raises a big question. If this pattern continues even a bit.
It could really change things.
Absolutely. The analysis suggests major implications for the next Scottish Parliament election, the whole political landscape up there.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. What about the independence debate itself? What could this result mean for that, based on the sources?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
sources definitely grapple with it. A Labour comeback, winning seats like this one, it could sort of dilute the mandate the SNP claims for another referendum.
Oh, so...
Well, their argument is often rested heavily on electoral dominance, right?
Yeah.
Winning most seats.
Yeah.
If they start losing seats, if their support softens in these contests, Westminster might feel it has, well, more political cover to push back against calls for Indy Ref 2.
I see. And how are the UK-wide parties reading this result? What did the analysis say there?
Well, Labour HQ in London will be absolutely delighted, obviously. Winning again in Scotland is critical for any path back to Downing Street.
Right.
But maybe more interestingly, the sources suggest the Conservatives might now be looking over their shoulder a bit more nervously.
At Labour, you mean, not just the SNP.
Exactly. A resurgent Labour in Scotland could challenge their seats too, impacting the UK general election maths, not just the independence dynamic.
Interesting. Were there any specific voter groups the analysis pointed to as shifting towards Labour this time?
It seems like it wasn't just one bloc. The sources mentioned a mix. Older voters may be concerned about the NHS, pensions. Younger voters reportedly frustrated about rent, jobs. But also, notably, some described as soft nationalists.
Ah, okay. People who support independence, perhaps, but...
But maybe feel the SNP hasn't focused enough on those core public services recently, amidst everything else. That's the picture painted.
Okay. So, looking ahead then, what should you, our listener, be watching out for in the next few months following this? What does the analysis suggest?
Definitely keep an eye on the polls across Scotland. Does labor actually hold on to this momentum?
Right.
And also the internal dynamics within the S&P. If leadership questions linger or support keeps dipping, you might see more pressure for, policy shifts or internal adjustments.
So to wrap up, based on all this analysis we've sifted through from the sources, this one by-election, it does feel like it could be a sign of a wider shift, a change in the political mood in Scotland.
That certainly seems to be how the sources are framing it, yeah. A significant snapshot capturing some deeper currents.
Okay, so given everything we've discussed, labor gaining ground locally, the SNP facing these challenges, here's a thought for you listening. How might this outcome really start to reshape the independence debate itself in the years ahead?
Does that changing balance of power fundamentally alter the whole conversation, the arguments used?
It definitely poses some big questions about the future path of that central issue.
Profound questions indeed.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us to dive into the sources on this one.
Always interesting. My pleasure.
And thank you for listening. Until next time, stay informed. Take care.